So normally there's a group of trucks that I'll work within. I'll be working within the same like 3 or 4 trucks over and over again. This week though, all those trucks were either in maintenance or they were being used by people working additional days. So I had to be put in a different truck on my Monday. Man, the truck they put me in, all right, first of all, it was a newer T680. So I should be appreciative of that. It had digital dash as opposed to an analog. I mean, that's the way that most of them are. They're mostly about the same. So they're going to be within the same kind of year, same kind of dash, same kind of features, that kind of thing. So once you're familiar with it, you're familiar with it. This time, though, I was put in a different one. Originally, they put me in a Freightliner. And they gave me the whole bin of keys, and I went out there, and none of them were working. And then I looked at it, and I said, well, this seemed kind of weird because the key wasn't in the same position. It was right on top of the handle. So I was like, wait a minute, this didn't seem right. What is this thing? Trying to figure out which key number it could be, and it ended up being a Freightliner. And I was like, yeah, it's a Freightliner. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll put you in Kenworth. I was like, okay, whatever. Anyway, they put me in this newer model T680. I should be grateful, right? And I might have been if it weren't for the fact that this thing beeped constantly. It was one of those things where it was like Chinese water torture. It was just beep, 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 beep. It just constantly the whole night. I mean, like I was driving down the road. You could be at a stop sign or a traffic light with your foot all the way down. You gently take your foot off, and then you don't even have to take it all the way off the pedal. You just release it just a little bit and put it back on, beep, and it would just single beep like I'm doing right now. It was like a double beep type thing. And it would put up a light that was like the regen light, or it'd put up a light that was the ABS light. And it would just, sometimes the trailers that we pick up, the Wal-Mart trailers, I'll write them up in the DVIR macro and say that the ABS light came on, but then I've had the same trailer again and they don't fix it. I guess it's because it's not an into the world if the ABS light doesn't work, because you shouldn't be slamming on the brakes anyway. I mean, it's an extra safety feature, but not all trailers have ABS. So if the light comes on, it's just telling you the ABS system isn't working. It's still going to break. So I guess it's just not a priority. But what I will say that was kind of interesting is the light came on constantly. I would be driving down the road and the light would come on. It would start beeping at me. And I'm like, stop beeping, stop beeping. And I was like so annoyed by the end of the night. I found myself sometimes just yelling at the truck, shut the up, just because it was just beeping constantly. And I would just be driving down the road and nothing different, no different, anything, just using my cruise control, driving down the road, interstate. It was fine as far as I was concerned, except that the truck would just decide to pop up the regen light, and then it would beep at me for that. And then that would disappear, and then it would pop back up again 10 seconds later and start beeping at me again. And then it would disappear, and the ABS light would come on. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop beeping constantly at me. If it beeped only occasionally or something like that, I would understand it. Like on the Schneider truck, and these trucks do the same thing. If you go to turn, you turn on your signal, it beeps if there's someone there. I understand that because it's making you aware that there's someone there. Even though sometimes the trucks, they will beep anyway, even if there's not someone there. Anyway, that was one of those things that just severely irritated me. I was yelling at the truck. I wasn't driving it any different. I was just yelling because out of frustration. Plus the thing was so reactionary. It was back to the old Schneider days of going down a hill and then it would go up. So at the bottom of the hill going up, it would freak out. It would beep like crazy, a long beep, and then it would pop up a red word that said emergency brake when I would go from a down to up. And it's like, all I'm doing is going from down a hill to up a hill. And it would just beep and put on the brakes. I'm like, what are you doing? It was so irritating. That truck, I tell you, if I had to drive that thing consistently, that would be one of those things. If I were assigned that truck full time, it would drive me so nuts, I might actually leave the company. I would say either reassign me another truck or I'm leaving, because I said, okay, I can tolerate this for a week. And I tell you, that was a lot to manage. I mean, I wanted to plug my ears up, but even then you'd still hear it. It's just be quieter. Man, irritating. Anyway. Oh, and what also made that extra fun was that in South Carolina, for some reason, the past couple of weeks, they've had the shortest lights you've ever seen. I mean, like you'd come to a red light and you'd stop and the light would go green. As soon as the light went green, you could literally count 0, 1, 2, red. Or it would go yellow at that point. And then you could count again, 0, 1, 2, and it would be red. I'm not kidding about that. It was sometimes that fast because there was a couple of lights that when I started seeing how quick they were going, I'm like, wait a minute. Because if you're watching the light and the light goes green and you start to accelerate, but you're not even able to pull much past, not even your drive tires are over the line that you stop behind before the light goes yellow, that's an issue. If I can't even get the trailer into the intersection before the other light turns green on the other direction, that's an issue. And that's the way it was in South Carolina. On a couple of these lights, I would come to a stop, and the instant that thing would turn green, I would put down the gas. I'd put the gas down, and it would turn yellow and then red within 5 or 6 seconds. And if I drove during the day, I would have cars that might be starting to accelerate coming into the lane at the same time as me. And I can't just sit there all day waiting for a longer light. How in the world am I supposed to know that the light's going to be going? And if I were to slam on the brakes as soon as the light goes yellow, I'm halfway in the truck would be halfway in the intersection. I would be in the lane. So can't do that. So really frustrating. South Carolina needs to get their act together. There's a couple of places in Georgia that are the same kind of way, especially if you catch them in the middle of the night, where it will spend so much more time in yellows and reds than it is actually green. Because some of these will sit there for a moment, and I will only have like a 3 or 4 second window to accelerate before it goes yellow and then goes red. And I'm like, who's going? And it would literally sit there for 15, 20 seconds and no one at the intersection is moving. I'm like, you're spending so much time red. It makes no sense. Someone needs to retime those lights. It's really annoying. Anyway, I guess since I'm in, I haven't really gotten into my assignments for the week. I mentioned last week the new stickers. They have they've changed it a little bit. The paperwork they changed a couple months ago, so that way we don't have the parent-child palettes, like the parent being the one that's the primary, and then the child is additional smaller palettes that are sometimes stacked on top. We don't have the child palette numbers anymore, so we can't make sure that we have the right the stickers pulled off of those anymore. We can just pull them as we see them, but we don't have the numbers anymore to know what stickers to look for. So that's a little bit annoying. But the new stickers, they're designed differently. You don't pull them off. They have a barcode on there. But Wal-Marts and Sam's Clubs don't, to my knowledge, have the ability to read those barcodes yet. So we're in that middle ground where the stickers, I'm still pulling them and putting them on paper, and they're bigger. They're not like the little long skinny ones that are like this, and pulling one of those off and sticking on paper. I have to pull this and pull it off on this big honking barcode with the number on there as well. But nobody can scan them. So actually, most of the Sam's Clubs, they use the little device to mark what pallets are being loaded and unloaded. Which brings me to an interesting point. Sam's Clubs there's more care being put into loading those than Walmart's. They are usually loaded up lower without going so high. They're not stacked up after they're already in there. Like some of the Walmart pallets will be in there. They won't stretch wrap them all the way up to the top. And then once they get all the way in there, underneath the reefer, sometimes they'll throw flowers and other things on top, so you can't pull it out without things toppling over. So people will have to go up there and pull those things off the top. Sam's Clubs, though, there's more precautions. There's the stacking is done better. The loading process is better. And also I've noticed that usually the stickers that we would check are usually facing out more. The Walmart ones are sometimes against a wall, sometimes facing backwards, something like that, in different ways. But the orientation of the stickers are usually facing forward on a Sam's Club one. which makes it easier to account for. I don't know why that is, because I would think that you would load them and they would be right, and you would take care of both your companies, not just the membership club, but also the regular company too. So I don't understand it. Sometimes I've seen a little bit. Anyway, another thing that happened in this new truck was if I put down the gas on the interstate, I was able to go up to, it would accelerate. It would only set a cruise control of 68. But if I did the double tap thing, it would accelerate up to 68. So the cruise control would go to 65, and then I could double tap and get up to 68 in the passing. And it would stay there for about 5 minutes, and then I could do it again. The interesting thing is I reset the trip odometer because I was curious. I reset the trip odometer and would go about 5 minutes or whatever. As soon as I felt it start to release the cruise control, I would pop it again and go again. So I had a couple of runs that were about 30 minutes in that, 30 minutes. I decided that since it was basically fairly level, I was going to see if at 65 miles an hour or at 68 miles an hour for about half an hour, what was the average miles per gallon on the truck. And it went up to 9.8 when I was at 65 miles an hour. It was the 9.9 when I was at 68. I don't know if that's just a fluke because, the roads are not perfectly flat. There's sometimes slight up and downs. But what I will say is 65 is the sweet spot, as Schneider put it, for governing trucks rather. And so going slightly faster at 68 miles an hour, the difference between going the extra 3 miles per hour and the fuel consumption might make it go slightly higher. It might not. It might just be a fluke, like I said. But I don't know. Something I'll have to keep an eye on. There's one truck that I normally drive that has a 65, and you can set the cruise control for 67. Anyway, enough about that. Monday, I was assigned, a pretty uneventful. I mean, it was really nothing really amazing, I guess. I mean, the first loads I did were just they were just same old. And then the second load, I guess, it was to a Sam's Club at Morrow. And the really weird thing about that is that the GPS routes you onto this one road that has a bridge that has a 22-ton limit. It does this every single time I go that way. And every single time you go that way, there's no way to escape it. Like when I was at Schneider, there was one place in Louisiana that I remember it said, take this exit. And it basically, you exited and then you crossed right over the road and then went right back on because it allowed you to, because basically it was a bridge otherwise. And that bridge was rated for, 20 tons or whatever. And so by exiting the road, you went down here and then you crossed over and went right back up. So you didn't go on that one bridge. Well, I was looking at it saying, wait a minute now, because I didn't trust the new GPS at the time. I was like, wait a minute, what are you trying to do? Because I'm supposed to stay on this road. So I stayed on it. As soon as I stayed on it, I said, oh, I shouldn't be going over this bridge. I went ahead over the bridge, obviously, anyway, because the truck I was driving at the time, it was pods, and the pods were never really ultra heavy. So I don't know that if I would have exceeded the 22 tons or whatever, might have. But I was in pickup mode. I was picking up some and dropping off some at the same time. I don't remember what the configuration was at the time, but I remember being a little concerned about that, saying, oh, there's probably a police officer or somebody waiting to see a semi go over this bridge. But there wasn't, so I ended up being okay. But there was this 22-ton bridge on the way up to Sam's I'm going to have to keep an eye on. Because all you really have to do is, instead of taking the back roads, getting off an exit early and taking a couple of little side back roads and go up that bridge, you just go one exit past. and it's like 3 extra miles or whatever, but it comes up on the other side of it, so you can exit better. If I go to Macon and then back tomorrow, it has me take that exit, and it's much better. But if you go just down, headed south, and you get off at that Morrow exit, then it's there. Now, because I had already, by the time I got there, I was already pretty much later than expected, because they assigned it to me, and by the time I got down there, it was like 4:25, something like that a.m. There was already a Martin truck in the dock, and then there was a Super Ego truck that was pulled up, and because his tandems were all the way back, I knew he was water, but he was lined up so that way he could back straight in. All right. We've talked in the past about Wal-Mart trailers have precedent at Walmarts. And so I went over and greeted the driver of the water truck, because my hours were starting to get low. And if the Martin truck in the dock took a while to unload, and the water truck, which could easily take over an hour to unload, and then I get out there and it takes me an hour to unload, let's just say that the Martin truck took until 4:45 a.m., which he actually took closer to 5:15, because I guess they started late. And then if the water truck were to go there, and he didn't get out there until 6:15, and I didn't get in there and get out of there until 7:15, by the time I got back, I would have been over. I mean, it would have been, because that was a Thursday, Friday morning. That would have put me in morning rush hour traffic. I would have been late. So knowing this, I went over and knocked on the guy's door window and greeted him and said, "Hey, I got the other half of this meat and produce load that this guy is dropping off right now." And so, Walmart trailers take precedent. So I'm probably going to need to get in there next. He said, "Well, I've been here." I said, "Well, what time's your appointment time? What time's your dock time?" And he said, "I don't have one." And I was like, "Okay, well, let me go in there and talk to him." He says, "Okay." I went inside, talked to them. Came back, and the lady inside there said, "I said, hey, I got the other part of the meat and produce," because the guy, I talked to him and he only had 8 pallets. He says, "Yeah," and I had the full trailer. So I said, "Okay, so I got the rest of your meat and produce." And so I went and talked to the lady there that was unloading, and I said, "Hey, you got a water truck here? I got a Walmart trailer with meat and produce in there. What you want me to just queue up and get in line or something like that?" She says, "No, I told him." She says, "I told him he could go next since no one was here. But if you're here and you got the meat and produce, then you got to go next. Get on in the dock next." I'm like, "Okay." So I went outside and I greeted the guy again, and I said, "Do you have a full trailer?" And he said, "Yeah, I have a full trailer." I'm like, "Okay." And I said, "What you hauling?" He says, "Water." I'm like, "Yeah." "Okay." I said, "Yeah, I just went inside and talked to them, and Walmart trailers definitely take precedent." And so she told me to get in the dock next. Oh, he instantly flared anger. He jumped out of that truck. He said, "You're full of shit," and he got out and he just started storming up toward that door. And, as soon as he told me that, "You're full of," I was just like, "Okay, go talk to him." She's like, "Oh, I will." I said, "Go talk to her." And she said, "Oh, I will." So he went barreling up there. We went inside. I went with him just because I wasn't trying to pull anything over on him. I wanted to, just because I'll do whatever the lady was going to. I had already made my case that I had a Walmart trailer, and if I needed to call dispatch, I would. But I wanted to just make sure that she wouldn't, backpedal with him there in front of her. So anyway, as soon as he went in there, she said, "Yeah, I told you that, but but Walmart trailers take precedent, so he's got to go next. Not my rules. Sorry." And he stayed quiet. He turned and walked out. He actually was so mad, he walked past the driver door, and I stopped at it, so I opened up the door when they buzzed me out, and then I just kind of held it open and then went on. And as soon as we got outside that door, he started yelling, "Oh, you're a real bitch boy," just totally pissed at me. And I just, ignored him for a couple moments. And then finally I said, "Look, you can say whatever you want to, dude. It's not going to matter. It doesn't change anything. Rules are rules. and but he was just constantly just nonstop, just pissed. And I get it. I mean, I understand. I was in that position many times with the NFI trucks over at the pods locations. I would be the first person there. I would be there, and then NFI trucks would pull up there, and then they would have to spend an hour and a half or whatever else, loading them and whatever. Even though I'm like, oh, come on. I just got one pod I need to pick up and I can hit the road, and they wouldn't do it because they have to get all their trucks out first. Now, not all of them did that. Some of them were like, oh yeah, the drivers of those are doing their pre-trips. I'll give you yours real quick. But still, I get it from his perspective. And so anyway, when the Martin truck pulled out, this guy was not about to give me that one little spot, the lineup place for that one thing. So I had to pull forward and then do a slightly blindside back in order to get into it. It's funny. I told Ricky in my Schneider training years ago, last year, that I don't see myself as doing blindside backs ever. Well, that was proven wrong real quick because I ended up doing it, I think, within the first couple of weeks or something like that. But now I find myself doing them a little bit more often, and I'm more familiar with them. I understand more of what I'm doing with them. I don't even need to adjust my mirrors anymore. I used to adjust my mirrors just to make sure, but now I know I have the feel down. I can also line up with landmarks. I'll say, okay, well, across from this is this, and then as I start to back up, look for this, and if I need to, I'll take off my seat belt and I'll jump into the passenger seat and glance out that window to see where I'm going if I need to, because it's a blind side. So sometimes I'll do that. It just kind of depends on how it lines up and how it feels. And of course, we have to do the get out and look now, so I'll do that as well. But I tell you, that policy is getting really annoying because you don't always need to get out and look. Like I said before, sometimes you pull up and there's 3 dock spaces right in the middle, and I'm going to go into the middle one, and I will line up as a straight lineup, and all you have to do is go straight back into the middle of that dock, and that's all you have to do. And it doesn't require it because everything is square in your mirrors. You see everything. And I've been at the same location so many times, but you still got to do it. They still look at the cameras or whatever, and I don't know what their policy or procedure is, but I go ahead and type the freeform message goal, and I jump out and look, and I'll follow the policy even though it makes no sense in some circumstance. I understand it's never a problem to get out and look. But I tell you, when I pull back into the DCs and there's like a 6, trailer gap in this one thing, and I need to line up to do an alley dock in, and there's no trailer there for 6 in 6 spots. There's not really going to be an issue, even if you decided that you were really bad and you just overshot the thing and whatever. You're not going to hit anything. Again, I'll follow the rules, even though it makes no sense to sometimes. And it could be argued, I guess, it always makes sense to get out and look. Well, maybe. But is it necessary or required for you to do? Is it required or necessary for you to do it a safe back always? No, it's not necessary. Sometimes it's perfectly safe for you to not under certain circumstances. Anyway, the one other thing I will say about that Sam's Club is that there were different people there that day, and they were really slow. So by the time that one other Martin truck got out of there with his Wal-Mart stuff, and I unloaded there, and they had me unloaded, it was just after 7 a.m. So I mean, you would think that the other Martin guy got out of there by about 5, I think it was about 5:10, 5:15. And by the time I pulled in there, it took them a while to get engaged. And wait a minute, did I say 7? That's a mistake. I got in there just after 5:15, about 5:15, and I didn't get out of there until almost 7. So it was almost 7. It was definitely sun was coming up. But I tell you, by the time I got back, it was in rush hour traffic. I got out of there, and by the time I did my post trip and logged off, I only had it was 8:50 a.m. So if I would have had to wait for the other water truck, I would have been dead in the water there. The only thing I might have been able to do, since I would have had the drive hours, is since I would have been logged off for over 2 hours, I might have been able to put in a split and had them split my time so that way I could get back basically reset my 14 hour. I could have done that, I guess, and then used my time to drive back, and then I would have only had like 8 hours off, but it doesn't matter. I'll still sleep the same amount anyway. That day was interesting because the first 3 stops I made, it was 298 miles, and I did it in about 7 hours. And it's funny because the second one stop that I did, it was only 106 miles. It was also 7 hours. That's the difference between driving at night versus driving during the day. You can do more stops, more hours, 3 times as many hours almost in this case, and 3 times as many stops in this case. No competition at the docks versus during the day when you have competition at the docks and just people will go slow. They'll sometimes take a little while to get in. They'll have to check in. They'll have to pre-trip their forklifts, and they'll just drag their feet or whatever. But hey, what am I going to do? On Tuesday, first of all, when I got into the truck on Monday, I had to log out the previous guy. He had left himself logged in, so I logged him out. It's simple, just press the log out and say, yes, go to off duty. But he clearly forgot to log himself out. And I remember he had 4 hours and 30 minutes left on his clock when I logged him out. He'd already been out of the truck for at least half an hour because I got into the truck early and was sitting there and familiarizing myself with everything on the new truck. Before I was even going to be logging in, because I got there early. The day guy, he was only able to do the one load, and then he wasn't able to get a second load, or at least I would assume so, because he still had, I don't think he could have done 2 entire trips in 10 hours. It's hard for me to do that. And that's when I drive overnight and have no competition in the docks. But anyway. So my Tuesday, I was put in a different truck. It was the guy that was driving the truck the night before. He was no longer in it, so I was put in one of the trucks that were in my my group of trucks. And I really wish, this is one of the issues that I have with Slip Seat, is I didn't know. I thought I was just going to be assigned the same truck all week. If I were one of these guys that moved myself into a truck, and then I had pillows, sleeping bag, I had food, I had all these different things, clothes and everything I had moved into the truck, I'd be screwed. Because by them saying, okay, now you have to move back out and move into another truck, because sometimes, you don't get back, and they would have you, lay over overnight. That would be really annoying, having to move all your stuff out and move into another truck, because they just, shift things around. And they didn't even tell me I was going to be in a different truck the next day. So when I go back, I'm like, all right, when I got there to get my paperwork, they said, you're in a different truck tonight. I'm like, oh, okay. So at that point, I went back out to the truck. I grabbed my book bag and the locks and stuff that I carry. I put those back in there and then moved over to the other truck. But it was like, I would have liked to have known, because I had already, started to move back into that truck. But that apparently was only there for that one night because somebody else was occupying the one that I was going to be driving in. And the truck they moved me into, someone was already had all of his stuff moved in. He had 3 different blankets. He had a pillow. He had a case full of apples, a thing of, what is it? It's the green machine naked juice, the big old thing that was sitting there. He had cups. He had socks. He had a pair of shoes in there. He had, clothes and just all kinds of different things. Apparently, he thought he was going to be issued that truck again. So I ended up having to take all of his stuff, put it in bags and stuff like that, and bring it back into the office and say, hey, and when I told the office, they're like, I don't know why he would think he's coming back to that truck. We can put you in whatever we want. And I'm like, yes, but most of the time we're in the same truck all week, and people who move into it would expect to be in there all week. And if you change it up on them and they already have all their stuff and you don't even tell them, I would understand if they were to tell me, even when I'm getting out of a truck, you're not going to be in this truck again tomorrow. Okay. Because if I would have left anything in that truck and somebody else had been reassigned it for day shift, I would have been screwed, because all my stuff would be in there. And there have been other people I've come up and had adapters and other things that they had left in there too. That's an issue with slip seat as far as I'm concerned, that they can just change the truck up on you whenever and however, and you're away. And all your stuff could be in there, stuff that you need to do your job. I know I've gone in there before, and there's been the steering lock on a trailer, on a truck before. And I've said, I can't have this one because I can't unlock a steering lock. So that would be one way, I guess, of making sure that no one's going to be driving it. And that's following company policy. But after I had some issues getting into a truck earlier, I stopped using my steering lock because I don't know if I'm going to be in the same truck again the next day. So I stopped using it. So I guess you could say I'm not following that company policy. But if it were an assigned truck to me, that would be different. But if it's something that I'm not necessarily coming back to the same truck tomorrow, then why should I put the steering lock on there and make it more difficult for them to reassign someone else? Anyway, I wonder if that policy will come back to bite me, because my mentor, who's been since terminated, he told me that sometimes they'll come through and, like, one of the Mr. Martin, the main guy at the company, who namesake, he's son of the guy that formed the company, will sometimes come in and say, check under the hood there, see if he's using his steering lock, and if not, then fire the driver. Of course, hearsay, that came from him, but on that note, the reason why he was fired, I don't know if I mentioned this already, I think I did, was because he either went through a red light or a stop sign. And the company's apparently cracking down on this. On the online Martin forums, people are talking about this a lot. There was a 13-year veteran driver who was driving hazmat tanker, and a light turned yellow, and he said it would not have been safe for him to slam on the brakes and come, because he was fully loaded. If he were to slam on the brakes, he might not have still stopped in time. And you might argue, well, you should be, driving at a speed where you can slow down correctly. Tanker, hazmat is a little different. Are you supposed to go through, speed limit 55 traffic light at 25 miles an hour to make sure you can stop in time? Maybe technically, but the light apparently turned yellow, and it was one of those quick lights, like the ones I run into in South Carolina. And he said that it changed a lot quicker than he expected, but they happened to be checking his driving at the time. So even though he had been driving, he was a million plus mile safe driver, 13-year veteran driving for the company. They pulled him in for a meeting, and they asked if he drove through a red light. And he said, I guess I did. I mean, if you're bringing me in about this, I guess I did. But he said, if I didn't come to a stop, there was a valid reason for it. Sometimes it's not safe for me to slam on the brakes or put the brakes on too fast when you're driving a tanker hazmat. And they didn't listen. They just said, okay, well, you're fired. And they terminated him. So he was a little bitter about that. And there's other people that are in the forums that have talked about being terminated recently for the same kind of thing. So I can't help but wonder if at some point with these short traffic lights in South Carolina, if I'm going to get caught at some point, if the light's going to go yellow and I slam on the brakes, I put on the brakes really fast sometimes, just to make sure. As soon as I notice how quick those lights are going in South Carolina, I put them on really fast. And I'll find myself driving 10 miles an hour below the speed limit just in case, which is, I don't like the idea of living in fear, because if I have to slam on the brakes or put on the brakes really, really hard to avoid a light that goes too fast from yellow to red, I don't like the idea of being terminated because the company would basically say, no, you still drove through a red light. I mean, I would like to think that if the light were only yellow for 2 or 3 seconds and I did a best effort to stop and I still went through it, I would like to think the company would have my back. But for more and more what I'm seeing in the forums online, they're less likely to. They're less likely to than I would expect. I mean, a police officer, I would doubt if they would even pull you over if there was a best if there was a best effort or attempt. But I mean, for all I could be wrong on that too. I don't know. Anyway, so my second day, my Tuesday, I was in a different truck. I wish I could have fueled up the previous truck, because this month here we have 5, points that we can get from Pilot and Flying J, and as opposed to every fill up of 50 plus gallons, adding to giving you a half an extra point, like 1.5 multiplier to 2.53, 3.54, 4.55. This time it's every 50 fill up is 1 point. So after only 4 fill ups, I was at 5 points, and I did that in the very first 3 days because I realized what was going to happen. So I fueled up at like 2 a.m. on the 1st of the month, and then after I fueled up that day, I fueled up the next. I fueled up the next day after dropping off my 3rd load, and then I was sent out again, and so I fueled up again a few hours later after dropping off my next load. So the next day, the third day, the 3rd of the month, I fueled up right before I finished up for the week and went home. And that was my 4th fill up, and that put me up over into 5 points. But one of those, it didn't register. I had to call up the number and talk to them, and they had to change it in their system, but no big deal. So yeah, I would have preferred to have 70 gallons or whatever of fuel at 5 points. That would have been $3.50 worth of points. Come on now. Anyway, whatever. Or maybe $4.50. 5 times 75. Yeah. 375. Yeah. So 375, whatever. Either way, I just don't like to leave the truck empty for another driver. And this would have been slightly less than half a tank. I just didn't know I was not coming back to that truck. Anyway, my Tuesday, I went to I was at a 2-stop. I had Augusta, which this Augusta location, it's like in a strip mall. So if they don't answer the door, which they don't always, you have to run all the way around the building. And if you look at it on Google Maps and you waypoint map it and measure it to get to the front door, it's right at just slightly under half a mile to get all the way around the building to the front where the entrance is. Half a mile to get around this thing in this strip mall. And because they don't answer their doorbell and stuff, because they're not always in the docks at night, it's annoying. So what I did is I would go over and I'd ring the doorbell for GM, because there's usually someone on the GM side. They have to organize and go through a bunch of stuff, and then they'll yell through the door, "I don't have a key." What's that? Okay, I'm at Meat and Produce. If you could tell them to open up the door over there. Oh, okay, no problem. And then I run back over there, and then they'll have the door open like momentarily, shortly after I get there. So that's good. But that Augusta location is also difficult because the truck entrance is in the middle of a neighborhood. It's like a regular neighborhood with two lane wide roads. So that's a little bit annoying because you can't just go down and then make a sharp right turn. Otherwise, you will drive over into the stop sign. So you have to go into the left lane and cut out all the way around to the right. You have to. There's no way around it. Very first time I went back there and I tried making the turn the right way, go down and then make the right turn. And I realized real quick that stop sign there on the corner, I was going to go right through it. So I ended up backing up down the neighborhood a little bit, pulling back over onto the oncoming side of the road. It's in the middle of the night, so it's not like anybody's really there. I pulled onto the oncoming side of this little neighborhood, speed limit 25, on the left lane, and then I go wide all the way over, and then I miss it. And then I had to do the same thing again, going back to the left, but I was in the right lane this time. But man, I tell you, it's just very weird how it routes you in there. But that and the fact that they were really slow that night. They were just creeping along. I don't know why. Next location was Evans. They let me in quickly, but then nobody wanted to unload me. I mean, they were just like, well, no one from Meat and Produce is here, and the maintenance crew are the people that normally unload you in the middle of the night, but they're not here right now. So it's like, but we all have responsibilities. It's like, I'm frozen dairy. I have things I got to do. And if I don't do that or finish it in a certain time, then they're going to come on to me and say, why didn't you finish it? And I'll say, because I was unloading Meat and Produce, and they're going to gripe at me about that. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. They did assign 3 guys. The manager there did assign 3 guys to run the Meat and Produce. So those guys showed up before the guy that was going to be pulling off of my trailer arrived. And these guys were waiting for him, even though I've seen those guys before just come up and pull the pallets off themselves. They were like joking around and waiting for him, jumping up and touching the top of door jams and running around and laughing and that kind of thing. So it took almost like 25 minutes. It took over 20 minutes, just under 25 minutes before the guy showed up there to unload me. And he was just like, all right, let's do this. I mean, I could tell he was being nice about it, but it's not what he wanted to be doing. Anyway, and the thing about that is that their cooler ended up filling up. They had all the pallets. They had been apparently getting a lot of pallets recently. So their coolers had totally filled up. So they were backed up and they were just in a standstill. I'm like, you finish unloading, I only have 4 pallets left. Can't do it right now. There's the coolers are full. And I'm thinking to myself, if it's out of my trailer or if it's out, if it's not in the cooler, it's not in the cooler. Yes, I understand my trailer would actually be refrigerated, but the door's open. So it's going to, refrigerate America. So I asked if he could go ahead and they could go ahead and pull off the last 4 pallets. And they're like, you're going to have to ask them. So I went in and asked one of the ladies, the manager, and she said, oh yeah, we'll get that for you. No problem. Because by then I'd already been waiting another 10 minutes. And by the time they got over there and unburied their pallets, because they had just pulled all the pallets straight in and barricaded the way. So by the time they put them to the side and pulled their pallets back and unloaded the last 4, it was almost another 20 minutes. That whole entire location just was not very organized that night. Other interesting thing about that particular trailer was that there was no rubber bumpers on the back. So normally you back up to a dock and there's a big rubber pad on the back of your bumper. And so that bumps the back of their pad and it sounds a certain way. It feels a certain bump. Well, when I first backed up there, it was as if I was starting to wonder if I hit it going a lot faster than I was expecting to. Normally you just barely creep up to the point where you feel the bump. And I was like, whoa, it felt really hard. It felt like almost like a collision. And I started to question whether or not I hit something. And I backed up there because it made a loud noise. It was a loud, like a metal on metal thing. And it just felt like a jar. And I was like, did I do something wrong? I did do my get out and look and stuff, but, then it occurred to me that when I did my pre-trip for the trailer, I did notice that. And so I was like, I noticed that the rubber was like barely there, if not at all. Well, that was apparently not enough to really stop anything. So, I had to basically just barely let the truck pull itself back and stop, barely pull it back, stop. I wrote it up in the DVIR. But I tell you, that was something that made me like, did I just hit somebody? It was kind of scary for a moment. And then I had a load that was, because it was only a 2-stop, my second load for the day was a 1-stop Macon. But when I got back to the office, this was Saturday morning, so it wasn't going to be an issue getting through traffic again. When I got back to the office, though, they said, yeah, you're making your second trip. We haven't even started. It doesn't even have a trailer assigned yet. So they haven't even started loading it. They don't even have a trailer assigned. Let's see what else we can give you. So they gave me a Buford, Wal-Mart, which is the local Wal-Mart to where my family lives. And then, another, the Sam's Club over there. Ended up getting to the Walmart during their lunch hour break, but there was a guy there who he says he doesn't really go to lunch anyway. He has to take a lunch break, but he usually ends up just futzing around. So he's like, I'll go ahead and unload you. How many pallets? I said only 3. He says, I'll go ahead and pull them for you. No problem. So I pulled up there and he had me out there real fast. It was 3 pallets and the guy was like happy to do it, even though it was during his lunch break. I was like, I really appreciate it, dude. Anyway, I got to the Sam's Club and it was 3:20 a.m. There was 3 available spots in the dock. This is one of those that I pulled up right in the middle of them. And then I said, you know what? I should go over one spot to the side. That way it's a little closer to their coolers. Every little second counts when they run every single pallet over by forklift. So I moved over. They didn't let us in until 4:24 a.m. 4:24 a.m. By then there was already a Frito-Lay and a water truck there. Anyway, they got me first. The Frito-Lay, he lifted up the dock and unloaded him himself. Got out of there. Got back. I mean, that's one of the locations where they have the little portable device, the little phone or whatever, and you swipe left to choose either unloaded for a certain pallet number or it's missing. And that is a location. There's one guy over there that will allow me to do that, because otherwise they have to get off the pallet. They have to go find the stickers. Then they have to swipe. Not all locations will let me do that. He's one of the ones that will let me do it. And so we go really fast, because as he's pulling them back, I'll go ahead and go in there and look at the pallets. And if there's something missing, then because it also says the parents and child, it says stacked pallet on there. So if you know that this is a stacked pallet that it should have it on there, I'll end up, as he pulls it off, I'll say, let me just check around there real quick. And then I'll check around there. And then he pulls off after I get the pallet numbers off of there. So that's a really cool thing. I guess he is one of the people that figures, what am I going to screw up? He already showed me how to do it. You swipe left, you choose unload. You swipe left, you choose unload. You swipe left, choose unload. He figured I can do that. So it's a helpful thing. It speeds everybody up. There's one lady I remember recently at a Sam's Club. She's like, oh no, I can't hand you this device. I'm responsible for this. I'm like, okay, that's fine too. I just wanted to at least offer it. And she's like, no, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Wednesday, it was Augusta Evans again. Same exact thing. But both locations were extremely streamlined. I got to the Augusta and the guy that ended up finally coming in and pulling all the ones for the three guys to pull back, he arrived, he was there, and he got there. He was there the second that I rang the doorbell. He opened it up and he started pulling them. He was ready to go, and he pulled them, and they were just moving them on to the back, and it was really fast. It was very streamlined. By the time I got to Evans, same exact thing. The guy that is normally, he's not normally there, but this night he was there. When he's there, he's extremely good. He will basically unload you. The way he does it, which is really good, is he will move the meat back. He'll run the meat pallets if there's no one there to pull from him. And then he'll unload the produce to the dock and then move it as soon as I leave, because produce sells on the floor at room temp. So he'll look at the pallets, and if it doesn't need to be refrigerated as he's pulling it off there, he'll say, okay, well, this is going to go to the dock and I'll unload you real fast, and then I'll run everything later. Or he'll have somebody, assigned to help him run them, like he did this night. But he actually was hands-on running the meat. So he handed off the meat to the other guy, and the other guy moved it, and then he pulled off the meat and ran it himself. He gave off the meat and then gave it to this other guy, and then he just started pulling off all the produce. So that way they would get to it after I was gone. If it sells on the floor at room temp, then why does it need to go into the cooler just for them to pull it back out to put it on the floor after I leave? So in the particular location, I guess. So he was like, yeah, we're just about to put it on the floor anyway. So I was like, well, that's cool. I appreciate that. Anyway, so I was out of there, both of those places in record time. It was really, really cool. So I had a one-stop Snellville, and it was removed, and I was assigned Gainesville and Cleveland. Now, Gainesville is very fast. I pulled up there, and they were very fast. They unloaded me to the dock, and then because they had like two guys there, he just unloaded me to the dock, and one guy starts pulling back stuff instantly. And as soon as they unloaded me, they just started tearing. He signed the paperwork for me. He says, "All right, you're good. The door's unlocked," and they just started flying things back. So I mean, I was only there a total of like 15 minutes. And that was including getting in the door, because they had heard me come up into the trailer. So they just opened up the door, and just by the time I, lifted up the gate, and they just started pulling stuff out and then running. I mean, they were wasting no time. So it's not like it spends a whole lot of time outside. There's more time spent with the pallets inside of the dock and not in the refrigeration when they pull them out on the dock in order to get pallets that are behind it. more time spent. So anyway, they were really fast. By the time I got to Cleveland, I tell you, that was also another very, very fast location too. They had a whole team of people that as soon as I got there, it was just before 4 a.m. and their entire team were just like ready to go. They just were, let's go. So the guy that was, their forklift was really fast. So he pulls up there, lifts it up, pulls it out, and he just dropped it. Normally what they'll do is they'll pull it out, they'll turn it, and they'll have to go around there and pick it up again and then move it over there to drop it. This guy, he pulled it out, and if it pulled out and like if he was pulling it out there and they needed to pick it up to move it this way, as opposed to him turning it and then picking it up and moving it over there, he just pulled it straight out, and then he pulled out and another guy picked up and left with it real fast. If he pulled it out and they needed to pick it up this way, he pulled it out and he swung it out, then let it, and the guy pulled it and left. And they were really fast, very, very streamlined. I got out of there at 4:07 a.m. and it was about 2 hours later that I got back to the office, turned in my paperwork, dropped off the trailer, did my post trip on the truck, and I was leaving there at about just after 6. I was like, man, I love this. So awesome. Such a great day. I just was so happy all day. Thursday, I was assigned to 4-stop in South Carolina. But the trailer also wasn't even assigned by the time I got there. So they changed me up to Greenwood, South Carolina, both locations, Martinez, and then a 4 a.m. Grovetown. Now I've been to that 4 a.m. Grovetown before. And I know that they can't unload you until 4. I got there at 7. I knew I was going to be sitting there. 9 hours. So at this point, I decided I was just going to walk and not run. Normally, I'm very fast paced. I'll jump out of the truck. I'll run someplace. I'll run up to the door. I'll go inside. Hey, how you doing? Let's go. And I'll kind of light fires under them. This night, I just walked up to the door as soon as they let me in. Hey, how's it going? You want to break the seal or shall I? Yeah, well, at least, and I always, because some of the people, they say, oh, we have to break the seal. Some people are like, oh, no, I don't break the seal. The driver's supposed to. Well, they told us in training that we're drivers are not supposed to break the seal. So I at least pull attention to it. And I say, do you want to break the seal or shall I? And they'll say, no, you go ahead and do it. And they at least verify that it's intact. So if they tell me to do it, I'm not going to just say, nope, you need to do it. I'm going to say, okay, well, as long as they verified it. I at least pulled attention to it. So they glanced at it and noticed it was intact. So that's at least that. And I decided I wasn't going to run up to the side of the buildings anymore because there was all the time in the world I had that night. I was going to be arriving at that Grovetown. It was going to be hours before they opened. Anyway, first stop I got there, I think I was dropping off 11 pallets. And there were 6 guys that were swarmed, that were just ready to go. They had their little, pump up dollies. The second I opened the back of that thing and dropped the dock leveler onto the back, 2 guys pull in there. They pull out pallets. 2 more guys pull in there, pull out pallets. 2 more guys pull in there, pull out pallets. And then there was about a 30 to 45 second gap while the 2 guys that had just dropped off their pallets were coming back. And they came in and pulled in 2 more. The next guy pulled in 1, and then I lifted up the bulkhead so that way he could go and pull out a pallet. Then the other 2 guys came in, and then this is what was interesting. They were supposed to have 11 pallets, but there were 12 total stickers with their store number on it. So it's like, what's that about? If there's 12 stickers, that means that those pallets need to come off because it matched their store numbers. Every single one of them did, even though my paperwork only said there should be 11 pallets. What I did is I looked through and I counted up the pallets that were supposed to be in that section. And I said, all right, well, the number of pallets there match the number of pallets are supposed to be going to the next location. And then the ones on top of the bulkhead in the other refrigeration section, the produce again, it's behind the bulkhead. Nobody's been back there, so I'm sure it's fine. It's the meat that I was wanting to count. So I was like, we're unloaded. All right. And you have an extra sticker here. And I checked and there was no duplicates. So it was like, well, that's interesting. So even though they were supposed to have 11 pallets, they actually had 12. And they were like, okay, cool. So anyway, there was nothing else eventful about everything. I dropped off everything. And when I got to Grovetown, it was like 12:50, maybe 12:55 by the time I pulled into the dock. And I knew I had 3 hours of waiting before they were going to open up the doors at 4. And I went over and I rang on the doorbell anyway, because when I was in the office, they said sometimes they'll unload you early if you ask. And I was like, oh, okay. So they said, yeah, they don't really have to. They don't really technically open, but sometimes there's someone that will unload you early. So I was like, okay. I went around and rang the doorbell. Nobody opened it. So I was like, okay, well, at like 1:45 a.m., I decided I was going to walk around the front of the building just to see, just because I was bored. And so I got out and I walked around the front, and there was a guy inside. You know how there's like the front entrance, that the doors that open, then there was the inside breezeway where you usually pick up a cart, and then there's an inside double door as well. Well, there was a guy in there, and he saw me, and I waved at him, and he started walking toward me. So I walked over to the gap, and I said, hey, I got your meat and produce back in the back. I said, I'm pretty sure y'all don't normally unload until 4. Is that right? Or is there a change? He said, no, the guys don't normally come in. But he says, you know what? If you're already here, I'm not going to make you sit there and wait. How many pallets you got? And I said, 4. He said, I'm not going to make you wait for that. So actually, there might have been 5. But anyway, he says, I'm not going to make you wait for that. Come on in back. I'll unload you. So I was like, awesome. Thank you. He had me unloaded really fast too. But by the time I got back, that was like 2 hours later. I got back. It was just before 6 a.m. There was not going to be a second load, because what load could I possibly do and get back in less than 3 hours? Anyway, I mean, and I only had 3 hours left by the time I got back. But by the time I picked up a trailer, loaded it, picked it up, pre-tripped it, got it fueled up, and left, I'd be done in 2.5 hours. So even if I got back in time, I'd still have to drop off the trailer, post-trip, all that kind of stuff. And then it would put me past 9 a.m. So I was like, well, I was glad they didn't give me a second load. My Friday, Athens, Anderson, Greenwood. Athens, Georgia, Anderson, South Carolina, Greenwood, South Carolina. I arrived in Athens over 2 hours before they were expecting me, because I start my shift at 7 and I got there just before 8. And they were just like, well, the guys that normally unload meat and produce doesn't even come in for over 2 hours until like 10. So I guess I'll unload you. I'm a frozen dairy guy. I guess I'll unload you. Might as well, I guess. I've never done it before. So I told them it's the same thing as meat and produce and frozen dairy are the same thing. It's just there's different temperatures. So when they temp them, they're different temperatures and they have to go to different areas. And he's like, okay, well, that makes sense. And he looked at the paperwork and said, yeah, that's the way it looks to me too. So anyway, he unloaded me and passed off things, and they got out of there. By the time I got to Anderson, the driver, the guy that was pulling off my pallets there, he was telling me that he was like, he was like, oh, well, you're actually involved in the unloading process. I'm like, yeah, I hadn't seen him before. I was like, yeah, I want to make sure you get all your pallets. He said, not everybody does that. I'm like, really? I keep hearing about that. That's really weird to me. We're supposed to. And he's like, yeah, some of these drivers, they just pull up there, they unload, they undo the back, and then they expect you to extend the dock out and do all the stuff, and then, pull it back in, and then they'll close it up and leave. And he says there was a driver that just had to go back there the previous day because there was a pallet left he didn't manage the load. So when he got to the next place, they didn't pull off enough pallets. He didn't even verify it. So he said in the past week, they've had 2 drivers that have had to come back and drop off a pallet that nobody had verified. It's like, that just to me is mind-boggling. It's like, and now I say this, I knock on wood here, because the last thing in the world I want to do is jinx myself, have myself believe that I'm managing the load. It's going to be fine. Then all of a sudden there's another pallet hidden on there someplace. But apparently that happens sometimes. And I hope it doesn't happen to me, but I also hope that I don't have one of these lights change and go yellow on me and then turn red instantly and I get caught. But anything can happen, I guess. Not trying to leave a pallet on the trailer, just like I would not be trying to run a red light. So I don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, though, got to Greenwood. They took a long time to let me in. That particular Greenwood location is inside of a strip mall also. They've always been good about opening the door. As soon as I ring the doorbell, there's always someone that can hear the bell because it's really loud. This time I was ringing the doorbell for a while. And then they said, hey, I don't have a key. I'll let you in as soon as I can. And I was like, okay. And guy just did not have a key, and nobody was there to let me in. So finally, I did end up running all the way around the building. I did run all the way around the building, as annoying as that is, because it was another one of those that's like half a mile. By the time I came in the door, they were like, yeah, we wonder where you went. They had opened up the door by then. But you know what? If I didn't run around the building, they would not have found the key just yet. I'd still be hanging out in the back. So anyway, I got around there. Then they had me unloaded really fast. It was like 20 minutes by the time I went around there. And actually, I take that back. I didn't run all the way around the building in that particular occurrence. I went around to the GM door, rang the doorbell and knocked on that, and then I told them, and they called it in. So that was that particular occasion. I'm starting to confuse my stops again. After dropping off Greenwood, I went back there, dropped off the trailer, picked up my second, which was a one-stop Buford. I was so happy that this was my last one. It was at one-stop Sam's Club in Buford, where the guy gives me the little the device that lets me count off his pallets. So I got there again, didn't open the door until 4:25 a.m. There was a water guy there that came in there with extended cab and stuff, and talked to him a little bit, and he got it. I mean, every single person except the one guy that told me I'm a little bitch boy. They all understood. I was like, hey, do you ever have to wait on other Walmart trailers? He says, yeah, sometimes. He says, and the water guy was like, yeah, I've been unloading before and been told you got to leave the dock. A meat and produce just arrived, or a frozen dairy just arrived. You got to leave. They got to go in there first. So he's been in the middle of unloading before, and they've kicked him out of the dock. At least I haven't had to do that, but apparently I'm a little bitch boy. One thing that's interesting to me about this time of year, the time I'm recording this, is that we're approaching the summer solstice, where the days are longer. So my nights are shorter. I will quite literally see light in the sky until the 9 o'clock hour, and I start to see the sky starting to turn slightly blue in the early 5 o'clock hour. And we're like still a month before we get to the summer. So it's kind of interesting to me, but it makes me wonder if it's going to affect pay. Like if night is a shortened period or a longer period, if it counts as more day and you lose the night premium if you're driving in less nighttime. Or is it like this time to this time? If you drive from like 7 to 7 all year long, it's considered to be night. Or if it's like 7 to 6 or 8 to 7 or something like that, if there's a time frame, or if it goes by the number of miles you go up until the point where official sunrise is or whatever. I don't know. How that is. All the other things I will note is that I looked at my pay stub for last week, and some jobs, if it's low number of miles, it's considered flat rate, because you go only like to Monroe, which is 6 miles, and then go back. That pays a flat rate fee. But if you go farther, sometimes that's also considered a flat rate. I ended up doing an 88-mile run, which should have paid technically $54.56, not including the stop fee, but it was given a flat rate fee of $50. So they actually shortchanged me about $4.56. Not going to freak out about it, but it's something I'm going to have to keep an eye on, because I don't know if that was entered in as a mistake or if that's normal or what, but that's kind of interesting. The other thing is, I've talked about the fuel island that we have at the DC in the past, and how they always tell you that there's a sensor directly on top of the trailer, even with where the tank is, right where you would fuel up. So what you're supposed to do is, if your fuel is here, your def is here, and we're not allowed to use the def is for Walmart fleet drivers. If the tank is here, you're supposed to pull up even with the pump, the pump there. So that way the sensor on top of the trailer matches the sensor in the ceiling. Well, one of the things I do is I experiment with things. And I've tried pulling up past it. I've tried pulling up and backing up. What I came to realize this week is, if I shortchange it, so like if as opposed to coming up even with the pump, if I come up to anywhere like within 2 feet before the def, because that sensor in the ceiling is not just perfectly flat, it's actually slightly angled out. I guess the sensor on top is slightly angled and also, or it might have a pickup like that. Because if I'm short by about 4 or 5 feet from the diesel pump, it will allow me to go there without me having to run and get a tag. With the exception of one day this week, one fill up. And when I went and got the guy, he says, well, you didn't pull up far enough. I said, but this is where I have been experimenting this week. This is the first time all week I have fueled up and not all the way been up even with it, and it's let me go through. So I think the sensor, if you look at the sensor, is angled slightly outwards. He said, yeah, it is, isn't it? I said, I have been short every single day this week, and this is the first time it's not been short. Every single time after that time that week, it was the same way. I'd pull up there, and it would be about 2 feet shy of the def, and I would get right in there and right out. I was like, that's cool. Something to keep an eye on. I'm going to be looking at that as we move forward with this upcoming week. But that's that. That's this week in a nutshell. Let's see what happens. The adventures of the Wal-Mart dedicated account on Martin. I am enjoying it. I'm liking it at night. I love the people. And the account it's not, I wouldn't say it's hard work at all. It's not, once you understand it, and as long as you understand what you're doing and how to expedite and help people move faster, as long as you're not lazy. And it's not bad at all. It's not stressful, except when you're in your second load of the day and it's starting to push into the time when other drivers are going to be showing up in the dock, and you're going to have to start competing with them, and you only have a couple hours left. And it's like that kind of thing is when, or on weekdays, because then I'm like, oh, yikes. Am I going to run into traffic? That's when I start to get nervous. If they sit me down tomorrow or Macon or something like that on a morning that's early, and if I start to push too late, that's when I start to get really concerned about traffic. But no, I'm actually enjoying the job. I'm enjoying working for Martin. I really wish I were being sent to the North Georgia mountains again. I miss going up there. I don't mind the miles. I don't mind it when they would schedule me, 350, 400 miles. I love that up there. But they actually asked me earlier this week when one of my loads that wasn't ready, had been assigned a trailer yet. They said, well, we have a meat and produce that goes up to the North Georgia mountains. I'm like, I'd love that. And they're like, yeah, but then we were just going to be shifting. And, we had to try to see if we can find something else, because if we give someone else your assignment there, we have to find someone to take yours. And based on when people come in, they wouldn't be able to necessarily get that load accomplished in time. So I had to hang out a little bit while they figured out another person that they could shift the load to, because if I traded with that guy because he wasn't in yet, then he wouldn't have been able to. He did a shorter run, then he was going to go do that one next or something like that, or maybe he just hadn't arrived there yet. But I don't know. What they said is that, yeah, if you take his, he'll have to take yours, and then it's not going to work out right. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. I'll take your word for it. Anyway, so yeah, that was that. I guess that's it then for this update. Sorry it was so long, but hey, I appreciate you watching.